There's a place at the top of the world where the air is so thin and the terrain so inhospitable that nature itself protects the secrets of an ancient species. This bipedal creature is said to inhabit the Himalayan regions of Nepal, Tibet, and Bhutan, a guardian spirit of the mountain. While the West views it as a wild tale and myth, in that region of the world, the people treat the Migoi as a real, albeit elusive, inhabitant of the high wilderness. 400 years ago, high in the Himalayas, Lama Sanwa Dorje dwelled. He lived in solitude and sought nothing but silence and peace with nature, high in the Punboche cave he called home. One winter, a storm raged across the peaks. Vicious winds and snow buried the world in ice and white. Outside Sanwa Dorje's warm cave, a low, mournful moan pierced the wind, a sound too deep for a wolf and too pained for a man. Following the sound, the monk found a creature of long brown fur slumped against a frozen cliff. It was a Migoi, the wild man of the snows. Its foot was swollen and it could not walk. Having great compassion, Sanwa Dorje did not see a monster. He saw a fellow traveler. Slowly approaching the creature, he gently bowed and knelt down in the snow at the beast's feet. Seeing a large thorn deep in the Migoi's foot, he gently pulled the thorn loose. The Migoi let out a loud, pitched whistle of relief. Now slowly trusting Sanwa Dorje, the two unlikely companions slowly made their way back to the cave. Once inside, Sanwa Dorje warmed the creature's limbs with his own robes. He treated the wounded foot with his own saliva and some dried herbs. For weeks, the monk shared his meager food and chanted sutras over the beast, slowly nursing beautiful creature back to health. As the snow melted, a strange bond took root. The Yeti did not leave. He became a helper and protector to the Lama, bringing him firewood and clear spring water. When Lama Sanwa Dorje sat in deep meditation, the Yeti sat beside him, its gentle eyes mirroring the stillness of the monk's soul. When the Yeti died, Sanwa Dorje buried its brother. Celebrating his life, he performed a powwow and did his body farewell with a sky burial, keeping the creature's scalp in hand as a reminder of the beast's kindness and service. The Lama Sanwa Dorje founded the Punboche Monastery in the 17th century and is a legendary figure in the Sherpa community, a powerful Buddhist saint and venerated as a semi-divine figure. He is said to have left his footprints in solid rock and creating the thick juniper forests of the Punboche from handfuls of his hair. To this day, many pilgrims still travel to touch the rock footprints he left behind, believing they contain his baraka, or spiritual blessing. To the people of the high Himalayas, he isn't a myth, he is a living architect of their faith and their world. And until the 1990s, you could view the scalp and hand of the Yeti at the Punboche Monastery left behind to remind the world that compassion has no species and even the wildest heart can find the path to peace, even the heart of a Yeti. Welcome to Rebel Road. I'm Mary.
I'm Haley. Hello, and welcome back to the Rebel Road podcast. We love you guys, and we thank you for continuing to show up. A few of you have even started to reach out, and we just can't be happier to be hearing from a few of you. Every time those messages come across, it just adds a little bit of joy and light to our day. Mary and I just giggle like two little schoolgirls when we see those come across. We've been really working hard to bring what we think is interesting and weird topics to you guys. So again, thank you for coming back week after week. We are working on our audio. I know in the last episode, it sounded a bit like I was calling in from the Himalayas, maybe hanging out with our Yeti in our opening story. But honestly, you should have heard it before Mary cleaned it up.
Yeah, we are overcoming the audio demons, Haley. I'm just declaring these worked out right here and right now in the name of Jesus.
Well, you got to pull it back to Jesus.
Indeed we do. And sometimes I forget that. I'm like, no, I'm smart. I can figure this out. And son of a gumball. Nope, that's not happening. And so we really thank everyone who keeps pushing through the audio with us. At this point, we've just given it to the Lord and it's in His hands now. So
Well, speaking of hands, how about the hand of the Yeti on display there at the monastery and his scalp? I mean, how do you decide what parts of a beloved companion to take and then be like, no, this part I shall display?
Right. I know that is so weird and odd. And I wouldn't want any bit of me put on display after I die. I don't know. Have you seen those Body World exhibits?
Actually, I have. I've been to the one here in the area at the Science Center in the area that we grew up in. And
Yeah.
they're very moving. And I would recommend to anyone, if that exhibit is in your area, definitely go check it out. It is so interesting. And of course, with every piece of art, because that's really what it is art. And it really kind of, they also provide a story with each body that is there. So definitely check it out.
They are really wild. And there's that one where the lady went and she's convinced that one of them is her missing son. That's a creepy story. I don't know if you've heard that. But just being dead and traveling the world while hundreds of thousands of people look at you, you sliced up and posed, that's creepy. But as far as that Yeti and Lama Sangwe, maybe a little beautiful, right? We have to remember he revered that Yeti like a brother. And that monastery isn't the only one that it's said to have Yeti remains on display there in that region. There's a second monastery closer to Mount Everest that has a scalp on display. And that is the Kumjun Monastery. I probably said that wrong and I apologize. But they used to hold rituals with these artifacts, those focused on fertility and protection, as the Buddhist culture really does see the Yeti as a guardian of the mountains. There are many, many old paintings and statues all around those Himalayan monasteries that depict the Yeti. It's just beloved in that region of the world. They don't look for him as much as they respect them. They are also in some ways very afraid of him. But in that region of Tibet, Bhutan, Nepal, and surrounding countries, the Yeti is just woven into their culture and their beliefs.
I love how the entire region just embraces the idea of the Yeti and that it is this guardian and gentle spirit of the untouched sacred places of the Himalayas. While here in our Western mindset, we see or think of a Yeti as a threat. People are hunting it, they want to mount it instead of something to live with. And we're going to get into all the Yeti things. But first, I think let's take a journey and explore the Himalayas, the world's highest mountain range. There's two continents that collide and some peaks so high they create their own weather. We all know the Himalayas, but do we know the Himalayas? They are considered the third pole as they have the third highest accumulation of ice and snow after our north and south poles. And if you haven't listened to our Antarctica conspiracies episode, definitely, please do. It was a really good one. But the name Himalaya means house of snow in Sanskrit. And the range is deeply linked with myths, including the home of Lord Shiva and our legendary Yeti, the star of our episode here. But I really want to dive into the landscape. So, Mary, bear with me as we uncover more about the elusive Yeti home. The rocks found on the peaks of the Himalayas show that the region was once under the sea, which I find very interesting. The mountain range stretches 1,500 miles from west to east. It's covered with thousands of miles of different types of forests. And these forests, they range from tropical in the southern foothills to temperate broadleaf and conifers. And then they end in alpine shrub at higher elevations. It stretches in a massive arc from west to east across 5 countries. And those are India, Nepal, Bhutan, China, and Pakistan. So this is a massive range of cultures. And all 5 of these countries, they have deep-rooted traditions that do share strong similarities with the Yeti. And while they often go by different local names, they all depict a large, hairy, bipedal being living in these remote mountain heights. All of them. Coincidence? Maybe not. There's over 110 different mountain peaks, and Mount Everest is in the Himalayas. It's the tallest peak in the world at 29,032 feet above sea level. This, in all of the world, would be an excellent place for a Yeti to live. And a little side note, did you realize you can't climb Everest in just like a long weekend or a week? It takes weeks, and I mean heavy on the weeks. Because of the high altitude, you actually have to go and live there for a while to get acclimated to that altitude. So, there just aren't that many strangers climbing those types of mountains, and definitely nothing like what I've experienced on the 17ers or the 19ers that I've been to.
Yeah, that's something I think our regular non-mountaineering climbing people wouldn't know. I think that's fascinating that you can't just go show up and climb Everest and go home. You live at base camp for at least a month. And it's hard sometimes to remember that there are places in this world that are still so vastly remote and untouched. But that's also a beautiful piece of the world over there. I would absolutely love to visit Bhutan. And Bhutan, they love their Yeti there. And they call it the Migoi. And they even have a national wildlife sanctuary there that's established specifically to protect the Yeti's habitat alongside other endangered species like the snow leopard and the red pandas. And this sanctuary is a statement. It moves the elusive myth of the Yeti into the realm of national policy. Their national flower is the blue poppy. And now this flower is so rare, they were considered myths until their official discovery in 1912. I'm just getting a little sidetracked here, but it's one of the few plants in nature to produce a true, vibrant sky blue color, which is extremely rare in the plant kingdom. And this little blue poppy, it glows exclusively at high altitudes between 3,000 and 6,000 meters. It has a short bloom life. It blooms roughly only 10 to 14 days in the short summer season. So in Bhutan, that would be May to August. And some species of the blue poppy bloom only once in their lifetime and then die after releasing their seeds, making each flowering event just super rare and significant. This blue poppy was selected by Bhutan as their national flower as a nod to the Yeti, for they grow at about the same altitude where the Yeti live, and they were considered myths. The Bhutanese, they also have had the Yeti on their postage stamps back in 1966. And the locals often have tales of encounters with the Yeti.
I've never seen a blue poppy, but I bet it is stunning. I mean, just imagine it. I bet it would just be beautiful to see. I would travel to Bhutan, Mary. From the images, it's absolutely beautiful. I don't know about that intense mountain climbing, but those forests and such, I'd love to experience that. But back to the blue poppy from the pictures again, just really beautiful. The blue, it's stunning. Now, I've never seen a Yeti either, but just because it hasn't been found, do I believe in them? So let's discuss that a little bit further. But first, I found it kind of crazy that the Yeti isn't described as having white or silver fur, like I think most of us would imagine it to have. That's what we see in all of our movies or drawn artwork, that the Yeti is white. But if we stick to how the locals describe the Yeti, it's this reddish brown or dark fur. And that's just a little odd to me.
Remember in our Dyatlov Pass episode, which was just last week, the humanoid figure stepping from that tree line was dark. And so this white popular version of the Yeti is mostly from, no big surprise here, the Western influence. We envision a creature living in snow and icy conditions, and suddenly the creature's white or silver to blend in, like a polar bear would be. But another reason I think would be his Western moniker, the Abominable Snowman, which came from a mistranslation in 1921 by Charles Howard Bury, who misreported the local Tibetan term mitokonmi, or man bear snowman or dirty snowman. Journalist Henry Newman later interpreted mito as filthy and eventually popularizing the abominable moniker for his readers. So, an unfortunate event, but it sensationalized the Yeti, bringing him out of the safety of the Himalayas and into the Western limelight.
So, how far back are the legends of the Yeti?
Well, the earliest I could find was with Alexander the Great. So that would have been in like 326 BC. During his conquest of the Indus Valley, Alexander the Great reportedly demanded to see a Yeti after hearing local tales of a wild man of the snows in the Himalayas. And local guides allegedly refused to capture one, explaining that these mountain dwelling creatures would die if brought down to low altitudes. So Alexander had heard stories of this mysterious ape like monster that lived in the Himalayas, so he went off on a mission to hunt a Yeti. He thought this would be a major discovery and evidence of his victories, and one of the rare setbacks of his otherwise remarkable career came when he was unable to capture the elusive Yeti, even after he had sent out his soldiers to search the highlands of northern India. Alexander's close friend Nearchus offered an interesting tale that shed some light on his journey and possible interactions with the Yeti. In his book, Indicae, Nearchus described how, when fleeing India, his troops engaged in combat with what appeared to be Yetis. They were described as being extremely hairy and having claws like sharp nails. Then we find the Yetis mentioned again in the 7th century Tibetan folklore that described a glacier beast or hairy wild man of the mountains. The indigenous Himalayan peoples, such as the Licha, worshipped it as a god of the hunt. It is often portrayed as a large, shaggy, ape-like creature, sometimes referred to as a mirka. Tibetan lore also describes 3 main varieties of Yeti. The Nilamo, which has black fur and is the largest and fiercest, standing around 15 feet tall, and the Chuti, which stands around 8 feet tall and lives at 8,000 to 10,000 feet above sea level. And then the Rain Shimbobo, what a cute name, has reddish brown fur and is only between 3 to 5 feet tall. So it's kind of interesting that there's 3 different classes of Yeti. And when the Yeti was introduced to the Western world in 1832, when a British trekker and his Sherpas, a naturalist by the name of B.H. Hodgins, his Sherpas reported seeing a tall bipedal creature covered in long, dark hair that fled in fear while in the Himalayas. But it wasn't until 1951 when British explorer Eric Shipton photographed those distinctive large footprints in the Melong Glacier near Mount Everest. He was between 19,000 and 20,000 feet up when they found him. There shouldn't have been anything living that high up on Everest. And, people just don't walk around barefoot either. But these clearly show a 13-inch long prints, and that triggered international obsession with the abominable snowman. And these images of the footprints are the most famous today. And those footprints fueled the abominable snowman hunt and expedition so much that Nepal in 1959 began requiring special official permits for expeditions that specifically targeted Yeti, or the abominable snowman. Regulations that stipulated that expeditions must pay a fee to the Nepalese government. They were authorized to photograph or capture the creature, but not to kill it unless it was self-defense. And then they had to turn over any findings or reports to those government officials after their hunt.
That's wild. And for anyone who has not seen those footprints, like all of our episodes, we will post the photos to our social media. So definitely check those out. I think it is important to point out that Shipton was probably the world's most distinguished explorer of mountain regions, really another true adventurer. His mountaineering style, Mary, really paved the way for future explorers to summit Everest. He began exploring and climbing the Himalayas back in the 30s. And my goodness, Mary, that's almost 100 years ago. So he knew the area. He knew the wildlife and the culture. And while some claim he was a jokester and they tried to debunk his photographs, his son was interviewed in the early 2020s for a BBC podcast, and he adamantly claimed that his father did not stage those photographs. And it really grieved his father all of his life that people had thought that he had done that.
And that's just a sad fact. People with a Western mindset, we just have a hard time believing anything, especially if it wasn't taught as fact. That stems, I think, from our educational system, which is influenced heavily by the Greeks. We just question everything and believe nothing. Whereas in the entirety of the rest of the world, they accept their history and their cultural roots, and they just live at peace with it. And I just want to say that truth is not limited by the number of people who believe it. You don't have to believe in the Yeti for it to be real. The people in the Himalayan region, most just accept it as a fact. But here in the Western mindset and region of the world, we have to have a body, DNA testing, and even then, someone is probably going to say no. And if that person is any type of an authority figure, people are going to blindly follow that opinion despite real evidence. That is that controlling the narrative that we get, and it's just popping into the light more and more. It is just really infuriating that somehow people no longer think for themselves. They need someone else to tell them what is true, and it's just draining the life out of our histories and this beautiful world that we live in.
Absolutely. I don't think I could have said that any better, Mary. We really don't know what a Yeti is. It could be an unknown species of ape, like a Gigantopithecus, which some people think Bigfoot is, or I don't know, maybe an unknown bear species. People originally tested some of those relics and thought they were related to an extinct polar bear, but that was later debunked. Unfortunately, most samples thought to be Yeti artifacts came back as a bear. And even Sir David Attenborough, a world-renowned British broadcaster and biologist, and a natural historian, he expressed serious interest of the Yeti. And I think we have a bit of his speech, Mary, right? Let's listen to that.
Undiscovered animals of the sort that we're excited about, but perhaps not there. I believe the study of it is called cryptozoology. I don't know whether that's an actual science or kind of made up thing. The Yeti, the abominable snowman, Sasquatch, the Bigfoot thing, the Loch Ness monster. Do you think there's those sort of things are out there that we haven't found?
I don't think there's a Loch Ness monster because if there was one, there would have to be two or three.
Yeah,
It would have to be a family, and if it was an ichthyosaur or something, an air-breathing creature, it would be coming up all the time. So I don't think that. But I am absolutely baffled by the abominable snowman, which is also called the Yeti or the Sasquatch, because very, very convincing footprints have been found. Yeah. What made them? And I'm talking particularly about abominable snowman, which have had footprints at 18, 19,000 feet. Nobody goes up to 19,000 feet just to make a joke.
Certainly not barefoot.
No, certainly not barefoot.
Flip-flops on the very
Yeah, that's right. So I think there's an unanswered problem there.
Wow. So there probably is. You think there might well be? Oh, that's exciting.
I just love that. But who really took his thoughts to heart? Despite countless stories, photographs, or footprints, and news coverage about Yeti encounters, the world still mostly calls them myth. In April 2019, the Indian Army ignited global speculation by tweeting photos of 15-inch prints near Nepal's Makalu base camp, claiming they belong to the mythical Yeti. Now, this is the Army, but you know what? They got so much flack for that, it prompted mockery, skepticism, and scientific rebuttals. This was on the NBC News, and you can find local news articles and even somewhat recent articles that report Yeti sightings. Some police reports there in the regions even allude to non-human, non-animal violence as a result of the Yeti. But they just won't come out and say it. But if you read between the lines, it was a Yeti.
It's just crazy. If you look at that from a logical standpoint, with hundreds or even thousands of sightings, footprint photos and local belief in not one, but 5 different countries. Why wouldn't we believe in its existence? Locals know the animal life. They know the terrain, the legends. People in our history were not ignorant and feeble-minded like historians want us to believe. And I think our inability to accept things that seem unusual or maybe a little preternatural, it actually makes us the feeble-minded in the history of the world.
I couldn't agree more. People know what a bear is, and they know what's not a bear, right? But let's take a closer look at an encounter that happened in 1951, the same year that Shipton came across those strange footprints in the Himalayas. Fellow mountaineer Richard Steinwinkler, he was a member of the Adventure Club of Europe, had his own bizarre encounter in the Asian mountain range. It was midnight in May of 1951 when he and his small team reached a remote high plateau in the Himalayas. He was looking for a suitable place to rest, and as suddenly he saw something out of the corner of his eye, a large figure disappearing behind an overhang. So Steinwinkler on his own, and these are his own words, said, "Instinctively, I thought immediately, the Yeti." At this time, I had certainly already traveled the high Asiatic area 10 or 15 times, and in none of my visits, I was able to get any credible evidence of the fact that the snowman actually exists. To be honest, I thought the idea of a Yeti was made up fantasy, and yet in that moment, I would not come to rest here. So I moved quietly and carefully to the overhang, behind which I had noticed the creature. And then I saw him, about 50 meters away, about 4 meters tall. He ran around on 2 legs, and it was difficult to identify as long as he was moving. When he stood still, his silhouette was merging with piled up stones on his left and right. My only thought was, I hope he doesn't notice me. All the curiosity, all the euphoria was suddenly gone. There was only reverent fear. With shaky fingers, I reached for my camera and took several photographs. Then I crept slowly back. This was my first and last encounter with the Yeti. His discovery brought so much ridicule to the recognized mountaineer in those following years, and the authenticity of his photographs was always doubted. Richard Steinwinkler does not understand to this day. Steinwinkler, who had been nominated the Climber of Europe the previous year, suddenly became this laughingstock. 4 years later, on August 8th, 1955, a Nepali friend who was a friend of Richard Steinwinkler sent him a gift from one of his journeys, and this gift was a scalp of the Yetis, salvaged from an abandoned monastery in Tibet. And to this day, the supposed scalp of the Yeti that was sent to Steinwinkler can be admired in the Adventure Club of Europe's clubhouse. In 1999, they had that scalp tested for DNA analysis that had been hanging there all these years in the Adventure Club, and it came back that the scalp cannot be assigned to any known animal species.
Mary, if you look at this photo he took of the Yeti, it kind of looks like the same silhouette of the one from the Dyatlov Pass.
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah. And of course, it is a little blurry and not clear, but with AI now, I fear when someone does get a clear image, it will be claimed as AI, but we won't get into that. That's a whole different discussion and maybe a future episode. But let's look at a few more Yeti facts. Tall, powerful creatures with ape-like features, shaggy long hair, reddish brown or dark in color with claws and red eyes. These creatures seem to be peaceful, often protecting forests or uninhabited areas where humans don't live. They are seen as spirits or guardians. And sometimes, though, they can be violent. We listened to an account of a possible murder in India by a Yeti, where local people were convinced the death was caused by a Yeti due to the nature of the injuries and lack of other evidence. The police report on that was vague, and the cause was not definitively proven to be a Yeti, but the locals did insist that it was. The man was found with his neck broken clean in two. And now, Mary, let me get a little graphic and technical. Usually, a broken neck is a result of twisting, right? So a vertebrae becomes dislocated or a fracture happens there in the cervical vertebrae. But this man's vertebrae were broken in half. And to do that, you'd need like around 674 pounds of force. Now, a typical man has around 300 and only about 100 to 150 on the high end for a twisting motion. So the local nomads believed this was a Yeti attack because of the force required to snap a human neck in such a manner that exceeds the known capability of humans or local wildlife like bears or leopards. So these Yetis aren't always gentle. And, that's why with anything, it's best to keep a distance. We've been speaking about the gentle, almost guardian way of the Yeti, but just like any other creation on Earth, there's always a dark side. The Yeti has also a violent side and has the potential to kill and maybe eat humans when the territory is threatened. That's another reason why the locals don't go looking for them.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to get too close to a Yeti either. And wow, snap that neck right into, that takes tremendous force. It wasn't just broken, it was snapped. And you mentioned he may like to eat the humans he attacks. He's also rumored to eat yaks as well. And this creature is kind of two-sided. On one side, we have this gentle and possible helpful berry root eating, maybe a small bird or mammal when food is scarce Yeti. And then on the other side, we have this wild, man-killing, man-eating side that when threatened, it's no holding them back. I mean, no wonder this creature holds so much fascination.
Yeah, it sure does. And I think we can say, I'm no cryptozoologist, but I want to say the Yeti and what we think of as a Yeti only lives in the Himalayas. All of the other creatures who share the same humanoid, ape-like fur-covered appearance, I think would be something different, like a cousin or some sort of breed similar. Look at dogs. There's so many different types and all different sizes and shapes, personalities and attributes. Personally, I love my Dachshunds. I got to get that plug in there. I say this because of the stark differences in the attributes given to others around the area, but not in the Himalayas. In Pakistan, there is the Barmanu. Now, this creature shares the Yeti appearance and is found in high altitudes, but in different mountain regions. The Barmanu is feared. It likes to steal the women and take it to its cave, if you know what I mean. And they claim it wears animal skins on its head as well. Which is a little terrifying. So while it may look like a Yeti and share some traits, it doesn't fit the Yeti bill as far as behavior.
That's an uncomfortable thought there about stealing the women. And you're right, some Bigfoot are also said to do that. So maybe let's look at some differences. One of the big differences that I can find is the howl of the Yeti, where a Bigfoot has a whooping sound and some almost human-like noises. The Yeti doesn't have that. But let's play some Bigfoot sounds. We can find Bigfoot sounds all over the place. Let's listen to those. So that is what a Bigfoot sounds like. And if you ask anybody, or if you play that for anybody who is a Bigfoot hunter, they're going to say, oh, that's a Bigfoot. Now, our Yeti is said to make an eerie, high-pitched whistling or swooshing sound. And other descriptions include deep growls, guttural grunts, and menacing hisses. So that's a stark contrast to the Bigfoot, and I want to say more terrifying. But I couldn't find a soundbite of a Yeti where you can find, like I mentioned, hundreds on the Bigfoot. I guess it's harder to go scouting for the Yeti considering the high altitudes he lives in. Locals say if you hear a Yeti or if it sees you first, it can paralyze you with fear and render you unable to walk so that it can get to you. And so that's a bad thing. So if you see one, hide and plug your ears. Yeti are also possibly bigger than a Bigfoot. We had mentioned the 3 different classes of Yeti earlier. So there is that top one that's over 15 foot tall. So that's interesting. And back to your statement, Haley, it comes to location and behaviors. After listening to a tremendous amount of other podcasts and nature shows and digging into my own research on the Yeti, I agree. The Yeti is likely to only live in the Himalayas, and hopefully he just remains unknown by science for a very long, long time. I just like the idea of acknowledging it exists and living peaceful with that.
Yeah, I do too. And as the Western mindset, it starts to encroach on the countries that border the Himalayas, it seems the younger generations are dismissing the Yeti, calling their parents and grandparents old and superstitious. And that's kind of sad to me. We need our histories and wonders. We need generational knowledge because moving forward, if we discredit those oral stories and we wipe everything out, all that is left is this sterile world where nothing is possible. And I don't want that. I don't want that for future generations. Then you're just believing a narrative that you're taught rather than going out there and listening to those older generations that really bring a lot of wisdom and knowledge.
Yeah, we need the history, the accounts, the lore, and the fables. That's what makes us human. And all of it together and overlapping and this chaoticness of all these legends is also beautiful at the same time. And we think the abominable snowman is something from a Scooby-Doo episode or a part of that latest installment in Hollywood's Mummy franchise, where they have those Yetis there. But to mainstream science, the notion of the Yeti or Bigfoot is little more than a joke. And you know what, Haley? Knock, knock.
Oh, gosh. Who's there?
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
The Yeti and so much more.
Yeah, he is. Well, friends, if you liked this episode, would you please do us a kind favor and share it with a friend or a stranger? Be sure to subscribe to the podcast, Rebel Road Podcast. If you would be so kind, leave us a 5-star review. We've mailed out a few stickers, like we mentioned in our last episode. We still have a few left. And if you would like to claim one, just send your information to rebelroadguests@gmail.com.
And a big thank you for their shout out to Rebel Road Podcast by Jason Ralph in his podcast, Broken Wing Nuts. That's a comedy trucking podcast. And I guess truckers listen to a lot of podcasts there on the open road. And he found us and gave us a kind shout out. So we appreciate you so much for doing that. And if the trucker life is something you're interested in, maybe give his podcast a listen. But if you want more accounts of the Yeti and a deeper dive into this fascinating creature, check out Yeti by BBC Audio. It is an amazing podcast, and I'll add some links to that in our show notes and a few more for some great Yeti research for you to do on your own.
And don't forget to always look at our social media for the images, like I mentioned earlier. We are working on our YouTube channel, which is just audio right now. Mary keeps pressuring me to go on camera, but I keep that to my real job for now. But hopefully someday we can have some videos too. So Mary, we will be back for our newest road snack next week. And do we know where we are going?
Well, of course I do. We are going down out of the mountains and to the south, about 2,500 miles in the same region of the world, to Kerala, India. And man, have I got a story to tell you all next week.
That sounds great. I love India. I love the people of India. It's just a special place in my heart. Well, everyone, keep it weird, friends. And remember, when the conspiracies and life, when it gets to be just too much, what do? We pull it back to Jesus.
Bye.
Bye.